I'm Matt Francis, Director of the Health Professions and Pre-Law Center over at Maxwell Hall. If you haven't seen me yet, please visit, stop by, make an appointment. And nowadays you make appointments from our homepage. It's all electronic, much easier than it used to be. But in any case, now I'd like to introduce the panel. Janet Hein, Director of Admissions for IU Maurer, who is here under sort of extreme circumstances, so we thank her very much for being here at all. Then Collins Byrd, Assistant Dean of Admissions for University of Iowa, great school, and of course you probably know Pam Bloomquist from Loyola, Chicago, also one of the most popular schools with our students. And with that, I will turn it over to the panel. They may introduce themselves, say a little bit about their school, and then immediately we'll open it up to questions from you. So thank you very much for coming. And Janet, if you want to start.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. I'm Janet Hein, as Mr. Francis said, from IU Maurer here on campus, School of Law. And I'd also like to tell you that one of our staff, Maurer Bernstein, our admissions coordinator, is down in front here too, kind of helping out. Let me just tell you that I've been here about 1.5 years at this law school. And what I find really great about IU Maurer is really the academic engagement and the high excellence of the students and faculty. If those of you who have been over there or have come to visit us, and I'm sure many of you will, at least I hope you will I think find that as well in the classes and in the engagement of your fellow future classmates. We have about 600 students total, anywhere from 180 to 200 in each entering class. Many of our students come from Indiana, but about 60% of our students come from other states and countries other than Indiana. So we have a nice variety and diverse student group at Maurer School of Law. The last thing I'll just say about Maurer, because you can ask a lot of questions later, is that really the school is very concentrated on student as a professional. So what we want you to do once you start is realize you are in a professional school pursuing a professional endeavor. And that's how we treat you, and we find that that's how the students then turn around and treat us. So I think the level of that professionalism is set at a really high status for our students, which I really appreciate. And that's, being at my 3rd law school, that's one of the things I think really stands out about Maurer School of Law. So I'll introduce my former boss now, Collins Byrd.
Been around a while. I've seen them come and seen them go. But there are times when you get to interact and work with someone, back from 1997, back in 1997.
Yep.
And learn from someone. And you'll hear from Pam. If you haven't heard from her, you'll hear from her soon. We were talking before how we have a combined 86 years of admissions experience across about 7 different law schools. So if there are any questions that you all have as we go along here, we've probably dealt with it. I mean, just about anything. Okay, I'm Collins Byrd. I'm the Assistant Dean of Admissions at the University of Iowa College of Law. I've been there for just about 9.5 years. This is going into my 10th cycle there. I've worked at 2 other law schools, one public, one private. But I've been at Iowa. Iowa has an entering class of 140 people. We had 141 to be exact this year. Next year we're going to probably try to enroll 150 people, which is downsized quite a bit from when I first got there 10 years ago. We were at around 220, 225. But that's something that you're probably going to hear a lot about over the course of time. Schools who have downsized from wherever they were 5 or 10 years ago to where they are now. Our median Lsat is a 160. Our median GPA is a 3.64. We have 57% of our entering class as non-residents, 43% residents. Historically, 85 to 90% of my applicant pool has consisted of non-residents. So the majority of my applicants do not come from the state of Iowa, and 70% of our graduates leave the state of Iowa to practice. So for those who think that if you come to Iowa, if you decide to do that, you're kind of stuck in Iowa. That's not the case. People are leaving and going all over the place to practice. 44% of our entering class consists of women, 18% are students of color. 12% of our entering class already earned a graduate degree before entering law school. The average age is 23. That's actually down a little bit. We were at 24 or 25 for a number of years, and this year we went down to 23. But we'll get back to that, the importance of that number. But the short part of that number is, the short point to it is, if you think that you need to work before you go to law school, that's okay. I haven't had a person yet, over 24 years, who's come to me and said, you know, going to work right after graduation was one of the dumbest things I ever did. I got a lot of people who say that it was one of the smartest things they did prior to coming to school. The thing that makes Iowa interesting over the past 10 years, the number one thing that people say that they like about Iowa and that they're impressed with is the civility of the students and the faculty. We tend to get some pretty decent human beings at Iowa Law, and for those that want to go to law school and be confrontational and have a chip on their shoulder and do all of that, they just don't operate very well at University of Iowa. Second thing that people say they like about Iowa is the national reputation. The fact that 70% of our graduates leave the state, and when I say leave the state, they leave the Midwest. They go back to Indiana, they go to New York, they go to California, they go all over the place. Third is location. People really enjoy going to law school in Iowa City. It's a big college town, it's a very nice college town, and so it's got a lot going for it. We can get into curriculum and all this other stuff later, and you can come to the fair down there. But I'll stop here, and then we'll turn it over to Pam.
Morning, everybody. Okay, good morning, everybody. Good morning. There we go. Come on, it's already, you're an hour ahead of me, okay? Because right now it's only 8:15 in my world. So, my name is Pamela Bloomquist. I'm the Assistant Dean of Admission and Financial Aid at Loyola University Chicago School of Law. Unlike my friends, I've only been at Loyola for the 31 years that I've worked here, so that tells you a little bit about me and about the school, I think. The law school is located in downtown Chicago. We're right off of Michigan Avenue. If you guys have ever been to Chicago and seen the Hershey store and the Ghirardelli store, that is where the law school starts. The university's campus building owns the building that the Hershey store is in. And so if you just walk a block west, you'll hit the law school. So,
I'm tempted to get up and walk out now. I can't be person shocked. What am I doing there?
and I don't allow my students to buy any candy there because it's too expensive and they're on a budget. So they have to go to the Walgreens if they need a chocolate fix, because both Hershey and Ghirardelli are too expensive. We are about 60% out of state, but unlike University of Iowa, about 80% of our students will take their first job in Chicago, and it's because it's a rocking city. And that is the number one reason why people choose to go to Loyola University, is because it is in downtown Chicago, because the economy in Chicago, while it suffered like every other part of the country, did not suffer as badly. We have almost 3,000 law firms in the city of Chicago, so there's plenty of opportunities for you to get employment while you're in school as well as after you graduate. This city of Chicago is part of the state of Illinois, and if you're interested in political corruption law, this is the place to be. We are also, unfortunately, the center of a lot of notoriety because of the system of justice that we have. We're very proud of the fact that there's a gentleman who is our Cook County Sheriff, Tom Dart, who has done a significant amount of innovative things with the prison system in the Cook County jails, and I do commend you to Google him and read a little bit about him. He is the reason that we do not have the foreclosure issue that we had in 2008 that could have gone bad, because he refused to kick people out and became Time Magazine's one of their most 100 influential people, and he was the reason that Citibank and another number of other banks started to get investigated about how they were kicking people out. So we're very proud of that sort of thing, and you will get firsthand experience if you come to a major metropolitan area, sadly, to see all of the stuff that needs to get done to try to make people viable members of society. Not a fairly big law school. There are 6 schools in the city of Chicago. We're all so different from each other that's the reason why we're all successful at this point. And I do commend you that if you're thinking about looking at Chicago as one of the options for law school, that you look at all 6 of us, because you want to get the right vibe. You want to be in the place that is going to be most conducive to your success in law school, because it's an arduous 3 years that you're going to be going to. Again, I'm not going to go into a lot of details. I do want you to stop by the table, and I think it's much more important that we answer questions. I will say one more thing. If you're going to purchase a car, buy a Honda Accord. That is the reason why Janet is here this morning.
And I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and moving and functioning and non-hospitalized.
It's been an interesting morning.
Yeah, same. And this is what it's a very telling comment about how we all work at our end of the desk. And that's why everybody who's in that room is there to see you. We're not there just to do a job. We're all very, very involved and very engaged in making sure that you make the right decision. So now we're going to put you guys to the test. We're hoping that you all have questions. We purposely were oblique to make sure that you ask some really good questions. And I always expect that of the IU students, so don't let me down.
What are the most common majors that you guys see from law school applicants?
Okay, because we're recording this, and I apologize, we're going to repeat, what is the most common major that you guys see in the law coming into law school?
Well, you know, I see a huge variety of majors, and I think we all do. Because of the nature of the interest of people going to law schools, I think political science is still the top major, but not too far away are many, many business majors for our applicants. All the liberal arts majors, history, psychology, English, theater, zoology, women's studies, absolutely everything. And to be honest, that's something that we look for in an entering class, is for the diversity of student background, which makes the classroom interaction that much more engaging. And really, any background is going to have qualities that will contribute to a successful law student.
The most common major that we saw, actually the common group of majors that we saw, was in the social sciences. Political science, history, English, philosophy, classics, things like that. But it's a very good question, because a lot of people feel that you have to major in political science to go to law school. That's not the case. And I'll give you an example of some statistics from my entering class. And this is just one example. I had 36 different majors spread out among 141 people. Political science was the single largest major. 24% majored in political science. That's the single largest major in terms of percentage. But flip that number around. If 24% majored in one thing, then 76% of my entering class was spread out among 35 other majors. And it literally went from accounting to women's studies. If I'd had a zoology major, I could have gone A to Z, but I missed out on my zoology guy. So follow your passion. Follow that thing that makes you tick. 8% of our entering class majored in STEM, science, technology, engineering, or math, something like that. So follow your passion, whatever it may be.
Seriously? Oh.
Are there any major disadvantages to specializing early, like in law? Like saying you want to go to criminal justice or...
Are there any major disadvantages to specializing early to go into when you get into law school?
Okay, I'll go. No, there are no major disadvantages to that in law school. And one of the great interesting things about law school is one of the few graduate degrees where you don't have to choose a major. You don't actually go to the registrar and say, I'm going to specialize in X, Y, or Z. Just about every other graduate degree that you can think of, medicine, business, which I have an MBA, education, pretty much every other graduate program that we have in this country, you have to go to the registrar and check a box that says, this is what I'm going to do. Law school, you don't. So you can come into law saying in your first year, I'm going to do this. But keep in mind, your first year of law school, you're going to be taking a core curriculum anyway. So your first year, you're going to be dictated to by the law school. We're going to tell you what you're going to take. And then beginning in your second year, that's when you'll be able to take electives that allow you to focus in. But even then, you can veer off. You can change your mind. My wife went to law school wanting to be a prosecutor and a judge. She went out, or graduated with a JD MBA and ended up doing corporate and securities law with a big law firm. I mean, and if she did her job well, which she did, she'd never see the inside of a courtroom. So she went in thinking, I'm going to spend my entire career in a courtroom, judge or jury. And by the time it was all over, she never saw a courtroom because her job didn't involve that. So you can change your mind. There's nothing wrong.
And the other joy is that after you graduate and are out in the work world, you can always adjust what you want to do as well. And you can go back to school, and law is one of the few professions that will require you to continue your legal education. You have to do that to stay a member of the bar. So as you fall into different things in the work world, you may find a niche that way. But I usually tell the students, you're going to come in and discover there's so many types of law that you didn't know even existed prior to coming to law school, that you'll discover many things that you might want to do that you're going to be talented with. We also tell the students, be real careful, because what may happen is that you may come in with an idea and you may not like it, or it may not like you. And your grades are going to dictate a little bit about how you want to pursue things, because if you're not talented in torts, then you're not going to want to continue in that area, because it's going to be a hard sell at the other end to get a job. So.
You know, I'll give you an example, and this is not necessarily at Maurer, but at the school that the University of Minnesota that Collins and I worked together at, or I was lucky to work with him at. I had a student that through the whole application process, Indian law, I want to do Indian law, Indigenous peoples law, I want to do that. That's great, okay? Got to the second year and went, I just took a tax class, and that was really cool. Person ended up being a tax lawyer. So not that they left that interest behind, but that's what they ended up doing once they got into law school.
Yes, you're going to have to really shout.
Sorry. How do you guys feel about gap years? How does that look on a resume?
How do we feel about gap years?
Gap years mean you took some time off before entering law school? Personally, I think, well, first it depends on what you do in that gap year. If you do something illegal, unethical, or just downright crazy or knuckleheady, then we have a problem. And I'm concerned about you. Not you, but you. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. The guy's up here, like, he's sitting here trying to, like, be all cool, got the whole time, and he's like, now I'm busted his chops. Don't worry, I'm only kidding. I'm only kidding. Breathe, okay? Breathe.
Kids love it.
I am a big proponent of taking whatever time is necessary to get your priorities and your good sense of your strengths and weaknesses in order. I am a big fan of work experience prior to law school, based on personal and professional experiences. I like for people to take the time to figure out who they are and what they want to do, and how the law degree is going to be the tool that will help them solve problems, whatever those problems may be. So seriously, as long as you do something productive, it could be selling computers, teaching little kids, working at a daycare center, doesn't matter. Just make it legal and ethical. And when you apply to law school, you're going to want to talk about, perhaps in your personal statement, what you learned from that gap year, what you learned from your activities in that year, and how you think it's going to help you be a better lawyer, better student, better citizen. So I'm a big fan of gap years, whatever you mean by that, in terms of taking time off.
We always tell the students that you should go to school when you're ready to go to school. And for many people, you may not be ready straight out. You know, most of you now start your education at the age of 3. So if you've gone through all the way through college right now, your brain is pretty fried. And you just need time to let it just kind of settle back down and see that the world that's out there from the perspective that you've now garnered from all those years of being on the planet so far. The second thing is from an economic standpoint, there's so many things that you may want to do that you financially will not have the luxury of being able to take time off to do after you finish your law degree. So if you are in wanting to do Peace Corps or Teach for America, or if you just want to hike the mountains for a year and see a little bit of Europe or do something like that, this is the time to do it, because you're never going to have another opportunity to take a long period of time off unless you win a major contract with one of your litigations that you're going through, or you win the lottery, because you're all going to be in debt having to pay back your loans when you get out of law school. So I agree with Collins. There's nothing wrong with living on the planet now as an adult and who is going to be a client. You're going to get a perspective of what your clients are going through if you go out into the real world for a little bit before you go to law school.
The only thing I would add is think about that. Try to think about it before you make that confirmation decision with a law school. Really think long and hard. Do I want to take a year? Do I want to go to law school right now? We understand when people have to pull out at the last minute. A lot of people do. We totally get that. But I'd rather have you think about it long and hard before you even apply. But certainly before you make the final decision of where you want to go.
Gentleman in the red?
If you have an applicant in like the bottom quintile of the average GPA that you accept, how much weight do you give to job experience and letters of recommendations, either from professors or from previous employers?
Okay, the question is if you get an applicant who's in the bottom 25 percentile of our reported statistics, how much emphasis do you put on the letters of rec and job experience, et cetera?
Well, I'll start. In evaluating an application, I'd say about 35% of my decision on any particular file is going to be based on the Lsat. 25% is going to be based on the GPA. So 60% of my decisions on files are based in some way, shape, or form on the Lsat GPA combination. The best way to offset what might be perceived as a low GPA is to have a higher Lsat. That's probably the easiest, well, not the easiest way, but the best way to offset it. 40% of my decisions are going to be based on some combination of all those other things that you mentioned. Work experience, we can gain some assessment of your interpersonal skills, activities outside of work or school, career focus, motivation, empathy, problem-solving skills, the desire to solve problems, because that's what law degree teaches you how to do. So we are always going to take a look at that other stuff, work experience, et cetera, but it's going to be a part of that other 40%. Good work experience, it's going to be a little harder to offset what might be perceived as a lower GPA just based on work experience alone. Now, if you had been out of school for a while, if you were a non-traditional student, it might be a little bit easier because we know that the GPA that you earned 20 or 25 years ago may not be indicative of your ability to do law school work or solve problems today. But if you're coming right out of school, and I'm going to take a leap of faith here and say the majority of the people in the room are within, if they apply to law school, it'll be within 3 to 5 years of graduating from undergrad. It's going to be a little harder to do just based on work experience. So if you have a low GPA, you're going to want to try to bump it up a little bit by getting a pretty good LSAT score.
Yeah, and I would say, I think all of us would say this, that, you know, it's difficult oftentimes to really assign percentages to certain factors of an applicant file, because when we read files, we read the whole file. You know, we don't just say, they have this GPA and LSAT, they're in this pile. They have this GPA. You know, whether it's us, whether it's members of our admissions committee, whether it's a group, the entire committee voting on a file, they're going to read everything and then come to a conclusion based on absolutely everything that's in that file. And I think many applicants are surprised at how detailed we do read those files. Absolutely every word is read by someone, and usually by more than one person, usually by 2 people. And if you consider it's admissions staff and it's faculty, and in some cases it's law students. So they're all going to look at things a little bit differently. The law student may say, I did that, I had that GPA, but I also had this to counteract it, so I understand that. Or the faculty member might say, yeah, but the major is engineering, or it's, you know, or there was an upward trend in grades. So even if it's a low GPA, they did strive to do better. So there's a lot of little detail involved in that. So just keep that in mind when you're thinking about that as well.
And the only echo I would have on that is that you just heard 2 different distinctive ways of reading a file and assessing an application, and every single school is going to be taking a different focus because we're all looking for different things. You represent, as an applicant to maybe 10 law schools, 10 different configurations of how important you are to that law school. And so I think it's very important for you to remember that picking the schools that you're applying to and realizing where you kind of fit in, you know, if you're in the bottom 25 percentile or the top 25 percentile of that particular school, the read on you is going to be a little bit different. Last but not least, do not blame anyone for anything that you've done wrong. So it can't be I went to a really hard school or I chose poorly because my advisor told me I had to take these courses. You need to take ownership. And you can probably very politely and very succinctly explain why your GPA is a little bit lower. I will bore you with one really quick story. When I first started working at the law school, my children were very teeny, as were the members of the faculty committee on admission. They were very unforgiving of a low Lsat or low GPA because faculty at law schools were, you know, they're stellar academic students while they were going through undergrad and law school. As we got to our kids being in high school and they started taking the ACT and the SATs, it was really fascinating how much less emphasis the Lsat had on the faculty decisions, because it was in direct correlation to their kid not performing as well in the ACT or SAT as they had anticipated. Then they started college, and boy, all of a sudden the first year of college grades really were not important at all in the decision-making process, because guess whose kids were not really performing. So many times it comes from a born of experience to realize that not everybody comes to the table on equal footing, and not everybody is going to be a genius. But there's so many factors that contribute to overcoming the first year of college, or maybe not being a really good standardized test taker, but really being good, that we're expecting you to provide us. And don't leave us hanging. Do not ever let faculty speculate on something that's going in your file. I'd rather have an addendum that's a page and a half long that has 6 bullet points about 6 different things than trying to sit there trying to figure out why somebody kept taking a foreign language and flunking it. And one student did in our applicant pool, and it came to find out that he needed a foreign language requirement to graduate. And he went through the entire litany of all the languages they had on that college campus and just was not good at it. So help us along that way too.
It's a really important point. Don't leave us hanging. If you leave, nature abhors vacuums. And so if you leave something open and sort of hope we give you the benefit of the doubt, you're setting yourself up for major league abuse. You need to tell us through, I would say, an addendum or something in there that says, here's why my GPA may not be as high as it should be. You could have been working, you could have been involved in a sport or club, you could have had some things going on outside of school in your personal life or family life, or you could have been a party animal and it took you a year or two to kind of figure out what your priorities are. But you need to tell us about that, because if you leave it open to interpretation, we will fill in the blank, and some of us aren't too nice when we have to fill in blanks that we don't know much about.
Other questions? Way back there.
So you guys mentioned out of the 6 schools in Chicago, each one is different. How does Loyola fit in, and what makes you all stand out?
Okay, I'll be happy to answer that question at the table. We're going to keep this as generic as possible. Okay? He was asking what makes Loyola stand out in Chicago, and stop by the table and I'll tell you.
Yeah, and you know, just to let you know, there's students at my table too, so, and administrators, so ask students some of those
Yeah,
questions.
you want to ask everybody that question. Okay? Especially if there's more than one school in the city. Other questions? Right here.
If your schools have early decision policies, I know IU has one.
Yes.
How have those students typically performed, and what exactly are your policies like?
If the school has an early decision program, how has that student typically performed? We do not. We have early notification, but it's not binding.
We don't have early decision.
Okay, yeah, so IU does, and our information's on the website, but just really quickly, you apply by November 15th, we give you a decision by December 15th, and we ask for you to confirm with us by January 15th. And it is binding. It is binding. So think long and hard. I don't want a student to sort of, well, maybe I'll, no, you need to know that this is the place you want to go.
And how
Okay.
do they perform?
Oh, they perform same as all the other students. It makes absolutely no difference. It's just a matter of timing and that they really want to go to this institution.
Yeah, I'll just chime in. We don't have an early decision program at Iowa, but long time ago, and we're talking about 35 years ago, I don't look it, but about 35 years ago, I worked in undergraduate admissions for a school that had early decision. And we used to tell students, if you know this is a school that you want to go to, and there is no doubt in your mind that if you are offered admission, you will go to this school, then apply early decision. If there is any doubt in your mind or any thought that you're not sure you want to go, or, gee, I want to apply early decision, but what about all these other schools out there that I may not know much about that I don't want to investigate? If there's any thought that you might want to look around a little bit, then don't apply early decision, because early decision, by definition, is binding. If you get in, you're going. And if you don't, then there's some penalties to pay, either financial or some other headache that's going to be created for yourselves. So, if you're thinking about going early decision to any school, whether it's, and I don't know all the schools that have it, but if you're thinking about that, make sure that that school is where you want to go, and then you'll be safe.
The question I asked her is that the other consideration on early decision is if to make sure that the school also is going to supply you with your financial aid award
Right.
at that time.
Right.
Because in the marketplace that we're in right now, you don't want to apply to 6 or 7 schools with one of them being early decision and hear from the other schools after you've made the decision and the commitment that those schools are going to give you a lot more money, and you would have, it has a bearing on your decision process. Okay, so don't lock yourself into something
Right.
like that.
And just to let you know, we do, I think most schools do. I would think it would be very odd if they didn't tell you financial aid in that early decision process, because you need to know and make that decision.
Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, do you have any tips on writing a personal statement or things that we should leave out?
Tips on writing a personal statement or things that you should leave out. Your personal statement, let me do that real quick. The personal statement in our school and in a lot of schools is going to be very nebulous because we want it to be open-handed and you to kind of decide which way you're going. I always tell everybody you should do 3 assessments. Why is this the next most logical step in your life to go to law school? What have you done to prepare yourself to really understand what the profession is going to be like? Because you can include that in your resume, but maybe use it as a tipping point for why you're starting your personal statement. And then the third is make sure that it's inclusive of everything that is not going to be covered elsewhere in your application, but do not include other things that might be covered in the application so you're being redundant. It is so much nicer to have a 2-page resume that has bullet points that talk about the leadership roles you had in different organizations or skill sets that you learn, so that you can just say, you can see from my resume that my love of children is the reason why I want to go to law school. I've had a significant amount of experience at both sides of the good and the bad and the ugly of raising children, and that's why my focus is on this particular area. A lot of schools like the warm and fuzzy of you telling them why they want to go, why you want to go to their law school. It's not really necessary unless some of them have a specific question that asks that. But it also tells us a little bit more about reinforcing that idea of how much research you've done. But do not take an entire paragraph saying, and I want to take a class with Professor Blum because he's in the health law program, and I want to do this because Professor so-and-so because he's in such a... You're wasting those 2 gorgeous pages that you have that are the only pages that tell us who you are.
And, you know, if you think about it for a personal statement, everything else is a judgment of you by others, right? The Lsat, your grades, your letters of recommendation. This is the one shot you have to tell us why you'd be a great law student and legal professional. So just think about that. That's to me, that really makes you think about how elevated the importance of that personal statement is.
One of the things that was kind of interesting, just a quick observation, when you, after you asked that question, personal statement, and Pam started answering it, boy, pens went up and heads went down. Oh, this is it. This is why I came. So I always find that interesting. A personal statement is a difficult, interesting document to put together because it is a reflection of you, and it doesn't come through any other part of the application. I'll just chime in a couple points. I like to see personal statements that focus on why you want to go to law school. If there is some character building experience that an issue or a challenge, personal or professional obstacle that you've had to overcome that has nothing to do with law school or why you want to go, you may want to put that in an addendum, okay? The addendum can be used to talk about why my GPA may not be as high or why I'm not a good standardized test taker, or how my grades were bad because I got mono my freshman year and that really put me in a tough spot. You use the addendum for those things, but you can also use an addendum to talk about just character building experiences. Again, I'm going back to something that happened to me. I've integrated 2 schools in my life. And if I went to law school now, I wouldn't go to law school because I necessarily want to tell people about integration or desegregation, as the case may be. But there were some character building experiences that came along with that challenge. But that would go into an addendum, because my focus on going to law school would be totally different. So focus your personal statement on why you want to go. Third thing, follow the directions of the schools that you're interested in. If Pam and Janet say they want 3-page personal statements, try to stick to 3 pages. If you need to go over 3 pages, call them up and ask them if that's okay. Because I know of a school in particular in Washington, D.C. that gives a page or word limit to the personal statement. If you go over that limit, they won't read it. In fact, they will physically tear off. Let's say if they say 3 pages and you write 5, they will physically tear off pages 4 and 5 and just read what they asked for, which is 1 through 3. And if you don't make your point within those first 3 pages, too bad, so sad, tip the waiter, and good night, ladies and gentlemen, because it's all over. So stick to the directions of the schools, for the schools that you're applying to.
Typically, what may be a good number of letter of recommendation to have from professors? And then I also have a second part to that question, but I need to say that down too. How would a letter of recommendation possibly from an attorney that you interned with look?
Typically, how many are a good number of letters of recommendation from professors, and then what would happen, and how would a letter from an attorney look in an applicant file?
Yeah, I would say we ask for 2. An applicant that says 6 is not reading directions, okay? So that's number 1. Number 2, we do prefer faculty, but if that letter from interning with an attorney really shows you in a different light than what the faculty wrote about, and it gives us just another view of you, that's great, that's fine, not a problem. I've seen many people do that, where they do 2 faculty and 1 from an internship, 1 from somewhere they've worked, committee they've been a leader on, but as long as it says something different, that's really the key, and tells us a little bit more about you, fills in the blanks a little bit.
And get the letters from people that know you well and will write a good supportive letter. Ask them if the letter will be a good supportive letter. Don't assume it will be. And as Janet said, make sure that it says something new or different and you'll be okay. And follow the directions. Again, if they ask for 3 and they get 6, there's another old saying in admissions, the thicker the folder, the thicker the applicant. If I ask for 3 and I get 6, there's something wrong. If I ask for a 3-page personal statement and I get one that's 20, I think my personal record is 22. I got a 22-page personal statement. That guy had some issues, to say the least. But if I get that, then there's something wrong. And what's usually wrong is you have a bad Lsat, a bad GPA, a criminal history, or you're the world's greatest knucklehead. And so be really careful, because like I said before, we tend to, we tend not to be too kind when people go beyond the directions or give us too much stuff. Be really careful with that.
Yeah, in our office, we usually say if you have to send us more than 5 letters, we start looking at the file to see what else is wrong. Because if you need that many people telling us how great you are. Also, a very interesting caution. Last year, we had a very interesting situation because we got a whole ton of unsolicited letters of recommendation sent to our office, not sent through LSAC, from a whole bunch of politicals in the area, and come to find out that mom and dad were trying to assist the admissions process by having all of these politicians send us letters of recommendation on behalf of their child. And so we finally, one of the people in the office called the young man and he says, please just throw them out. Please just throw them out. I am so sorry. Mom and dad are a little too zealous. I'm going to tell the story real quickly. When my children were younger, when we first started, when the letters of recommendation did come to our office, we got 2 letters of recommendation on the same day. One came from the White House and one came from the San Francisco 49ers. And this goes to whether or not you should go outside the realm of sending just faculty letters. Needless to say, the whole office was real excited about it because the embossment of the White House, which by the way, doesn't list their zip code. I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the embossment of the 49ers, which is my eldest son's favorite football team, so needless to say, I commandeered both of the envelopes addressed to me, came home and was the coolest mom in the whole world. So, but what was interesting is inside the White House letter was 5 sentences. I know this young man is going to be great because his father and I served on a committee when I was governor of the state. That was the extent of the letter. The letter from the San Francisco 49ers was 4 pages long. And it was from the Public Relations Department, which I thought was kind of interesting. And the reason it was 4 pages long is because the applicant, had got an internship with the 49ers for his senior year. He was a marketing major at a California school. And, excuse me, he is the person that developed the NFL United Way. And that's the reason why it was 4 pages long. They wanted to really give him all the kudos he deserved for having worked it through the system and got it all started with just the 49ers, and then got it started with the Raiders, got it started with the Rams during that 1 year, and then presented it to the NFL, and they bought into it. Which one would you admit? I mean, it's a no-brainer. But the reason I say that is that it encapsulates something that was only 3 lines on his resume, which is I did an internship with the San Francisco 49ers and developed a program with a nonprofit organization. So that's the way that you flesh out that letter, and it goes back to what you guys were saying about the importance of picking your recommenders to touch on something that will not be in your application, that will be judgment, but will also be expanding our horizon of who you are.
Take that lady right in the back corner, back there.
Back
Hi.
there, yeah.
Hi, welcome to Indiana.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I know the gentleman in the middle, you're from Iowa,
Yes, ma'am.
so am I.
Cool deal.
Originally, how high in Hoosier land.
We need a good left tackle. He got hurt.
My son just graduated as a neurologist there in June, so pretty proud of that. He was Hoosier at Iowa, where I was from. I'm here in Indiana going back to school as a non-conventional student after my 50s. What are what's the welcoming committee like as far as the statistics for somebody like me, who's been successful in her own right in 20 to 30 years of business, just affected by the economy, didn't have a degree, and now trying to find my way and thinking of law school. What are the statistics of looking at somebody like myself?
The question is what are the statistics and background information for someone coming back to school after an extended period of time, particularly somebody who's finishing up their bachelor's degree, as opposed to just changing careers after a 20-year experience?
Well, first of all, you're not that unusual in law school, as you may think you are, but you're not. Now, having said that, our average age was about 24 as well, but that's average age. So we have enough non-traditional students that brings that age up above the 22, 23 level a little bit. Okay, now the other side is we probably have 20, 25 students over the age of 30, so it's not a large amount. But you really are certainly treated in law school like everyone else. And as a matter of fact, the life experience and the diversity of experiences you have does contribute a lot to the classroom. So I really think, and that's really how students right out of undergrad look at it too. They're looking at those non-traditional students going, I can learn a lot from these students because they've been places I haven't been to. And as far as the process, I just think somebody like you may have a lot more information in an application than a traditional applicant. Not that anything is positive or negative about that, but it's just a lot more we can look at, a lot of different facets and experiences.
It's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it, and welcome. I'm glad to have you here for a number of reasons. And this gets to, I think, the heart of what we do as admissions officers, and the heart of what I call the educational benefits of diversity. When I read a file, any file, I don't care if you're 20 or 50 something, I don't care if you have a 140 LSAT or a 180 LSAT. My job as an admissions officer is to take into consideration what you've achieved over time and also what you've had to go through to achieve it. And so I need to read that file. Janet mentioned before, we read every single word. The writing sample at the end of the Lsat, the 30-minute pain in the butt, you're tired, you want to get out of there, but they give you that 30-minute writing sample, we read it. Sometimes it's hard to read because the penmanship is a little difficult, but we read it. We read every part of that file because we need to gain some assessment as to what you've achieved over time and what you've had to go through to get there. And that draws into what I call the educational benefits of diversity. If you were to just check a box and say, well, I'm 50 and I have work experience. Okay, well, as she said, we get a lot of people who've applied who are 50 plus and have work experience. Some are admitted, some aren't. They go through the same process. But we take into consideration what they will add to the discussion in the classroom. That's the key. It's not the box you check. Race, gender, sexual orientation. I don't care about that stuff as much as I care about the addition that it's going to have in the classroom. Because we as a group, not just Iowa, Loyola, Indiana, Iowa, there are going to be 124 schools in that room today. And we all produce people who are going to make positive impacts on society because they all figured out a way to learn from each other. You really get into law school and each and every one of you will find out just how better you are because you interact with people who may not look like you, who may not think like you, who may have more work experience than you do, who lived life a little bit, who've raised a kid that did well, may have raised a kid that kind of messed up. You all will be better as a group to serve society because you grew up with each other in the classroom. So it's the educational benefits of diversity that we're going to read. So yes, we're going to look at LSAT and GPA. I know I talked about that before, and I didn't want, maybe if I gave the impression we emphasize that quite a bit. I apologize, I'm going to back off on that, but we still do look at it. But the other 40% of what I look at is embedded in that question that you asked. What if you had to go through to get where you are, and how have those experiences influenced you to get where you want to go? Wherever it may be, and I don't make judgments on whether you want to go into politics, if you lean to the left, lean to the right, you're middle of the road politically. I'm not paid enough money to worry about that stuff. I got my own problems. But you all are going to be better off because of that educational benefit of diversity that comes into the classroom. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Good job. There's a couple of things that you're going to bring to the classroom in addition to that wealth of knowledge, and one of them is stamina. You're going to drive all the young people crazy by the fact that you're keeping up with them because of the fact that they know that you've had life experience and are a little bit older, and it's going to push everybody a little bit harder. We've seen that time and true. About a third of our class is over the age of 27 because of the fact that we're in a metropolitan area, and also we have a part-time program, so we have a lot of professional people coming in. The thing I want to address with you is what your goals are after law school, because if you are looking to work at one of the most prestigious law firms in the country, and that's, you just want to work at a big firm like in Suits on TV, you're going to have to work your butt off a lot harder than somebody who is 22 coming into law school, because they have a bias about taking somebody of your age bracket and investing that much time and energy because you've got a shorter shelf life.
Yeah.
Okay? If you are planning on going into a medium-sized firm or in public service, you're going to be welcomed with open arms. One of my favorite stories that I tell is one of our women who was about 51 years old when she graduated law school, worked for a medium-sized firm. There was a couple sitting in the waiting area to see a receptionist, and she walked by and they said, "We want her," solely based upon the fact that the years on the planet. She's got to be bright, even though it was only her first year out of law school. And so the perception of your client is going to be very different because of that. But everything Collins and Janet just said is so true. You are bringing such a wealth of knowledge to the classroom based upon your years on the planet that it's going to be very welcomed, and we all look at it as being an asset.
Thank you.
There was actually a question.
Down here? Yeah.
Yeah, my question is, how do you guys feel about a student that's trying to joint degree in graduate school, like a JD, MD degree, or a JD, MBA? Why is it?
The question about doing a dual degree while you're in law school, like a JD MBA or a JD EdCert, most of us have dual degrees, so we all have done that. Sometimes at the behest of the other program rather than the JD program. We have about 850 students in the building, of which about 30 are actually doing a dual degree. On the application, we ask how many want to do that, and about a quarter of the class of the applicants indicate they want to do it. So that tells you right there, 9 times out of 10 after your first year of law school, you change your mind.
We have 30 to 35 joint degree students. And again, the majority of the programs up there in the room today you'll find are going to offer dual degrees. Most of those schools have anything from a JD MBA, which may be the most popular one, the most common one, the one that makes most sense. And then you get some schools that have a JD MD, people who go to law school and medical school. Now, that's an interesting group. But they have reasons. We happen to have a program like that. We get 1 or 2 a year. But we make sure that their reasons are clear. And that's one thing I'll say about joint degree programs. Make sure you have a clear understanding of why you're doing it. Because you don't want to get into a situation where you're getting a joint degree to kind of cover your butt in case anything happens. Because at some point, you say, okay, I'll get a JD so I can get myself out of trouble if anything happens. I'll get an MBA so I can run my own business. I'll get an engineering degree, I can build my own house. I'll get a medical degree because I can fix myself if I get sick. I mean, at some point, you have to ask yourself, okay, step back, ask yourself, why am I getting this degree? To solve other people's, other entities' problems. What can I get from the JD? And after the first year of law school, you may find the JD will give you pretty much everything you need. Or you may say, getting a master's degree in XYZ, or a PhD, or an MD, is going to give me more tools to solve problems. So we welcome them, they're fine, but I tell people be very sure as to why you're doing it. And then one final thing I'll say, most programs will make you start law school first. Because law school, aside from the first year of medical school, law school is one of the more difficult exercises that you're going to go through, academically and intellectually. So I tell people, start law school first, go through 1, maybe even 2 years of law school. Somewhere by the middle of your second year of law school, you need to make a decision if you're going to join the other program, because you have to apply, be admitted, the registrars have to get together and get the curriculum squared away. But make sure you know why you want to do it, and expect to start law school first before you get into the other.
And that's very true. The only caveat I would say is here at IU, you can start another program first, but contact us before you do that. It has some financial aid implications. That's the only reason I say that. So,
Young lady right here.
Regarding the application process, when it comes to international students, do you have different expectations, or is there a difference? Because I know that some schools do ask for the TOEFL if English is not their first language, but besides that, is there any difference?
Did everybody hear the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. For international students, do we have any different expectations? Do we require the TOEFL? Is there anything else that we expect of an international student that we don't of a U.S. citizen?
There really isn't. We do, though, ask for the TOEFL if you have either not gotten a degree here or have not lived here a certain amount of time. So it's not an absolute requirement, but most of our international students do send us a TOEFL score. We really don't have a cutoff. We leave it up to the admissions committee to look at those scores. But again, that whole file review comes into play. So that TOEFL is sort of another piece that we'll look at, as well as if you've got a foreign degree or foreign transcript, that's just another piece we look at as part of the application process, but nothing else different.
The one thing I'll say that might make a big difference is check the schools that you're interested in. Check their policies on financial aid. Depending on whether the school is public or private, depending on state regulations, you may or may not be eligible for some areas of financial aid, specifically in the form of scholarships. There's some schools, depending on the school, that will say, well, everyone's eligible. And then there's some where the state law or the regents of the public institutions say that international students are not eligible for some scholarships. So check the financial aid policies of the schools. But aside from that, the admissions process is pretty much the same.
Yes,
ma'am. Do you have any specific views or opinions about students who graduate a year early and want to go straight into law school?
Do we have any specific opinions or views about students who graduate a year early who want to go straight into law school, i.e. completing an undergrad degree in 3 years rather than 4? The biggest problem is drinking, because you're probably not going to be 21. And I'm serious.
I turned 21 in October.
Okay, then you're golden, you're fine then. We had a student in the first year class who is not turning 21 until October 1st. She couldn't go on the booze cruise, she couldn't go on all these other stuff. As an aside, but in very serious terms, being 20 does put you at a disadvantage of 1 more year on the planet experience. And so going in and understanding that, it also goes back to what I was saying about being in school since 3rd grade. Going all the way through, make sure that you don't get halfway through the first year of your law school experience and say, my brain can't handle it, I need to take a walk away. So while I think it's noble on your part, and if you're a totally driven person and you know definitely this is what you want to do, then fine. But from my perspective, if you were my child, I would say I'd like you to take the year off, just to kind of get your footing and enjoy life a little bit, because you've been pushing yourself a lot harder than everybody else that you've gone to school with, who usually take 5 years or 4.5 years to complete a degree. And I know that economically people are pushing back to the 4, but I would just advise that.
I agree. The one thing that we look at and consider a little bit more with students who are graduating early would be the maturity factor. It's another way of saying what Pam said. Just to make sure that you can handle an environment where students are anywhere from 23, 24, 25, 26 years old. Some, 35, 40% have come right out of undergrad, but 60 to 65% have work experience. And it is amazing, for those of you who don't have full-time work experience, it is amazing how you look at the world after having had to answer to someone on a job, having to pay rent, do all that, even after a year or 2. And so I look for that. We have a student entering class this year who's 20, who's doing fine, as far as we know. We're only a month into the first year, so we'll kind of see what happens. I have a niece who started law school at 18, and I did what Pam did. She was driven, both as much by her parents as much as anything else, and I tried to talk her out of it, but she wouldn't be talked out of it. She graduated, she did fine, not from Iowa, it's another law school. But I was very concerned because, yeah, I mean, she's going to be going to school with people who can vote. Well, she can vote, but they can go to war, they can smoke, they can drink, they can die for this country. They have to put up numbers, they have to take care of family, they have things that they have to take care of. And she didn't have that experience. She's very smart. Off the scale, weirdo kind of smart, but smart. She's 18 and starting law school. But she did okay. But I will tell you, without going into a lot of detail, because we don't have time for it, she and I had a number of talks where she would call up and say, Uncle Collins, I think I'm going to school with a bunch of sociopaths. I go, well, no, you're not going to school with sociopaths. That's not it. It's just you don't have quite the life experience they have. And they have a wealth of, and a background where they can add to their classroom experience. So again, it's the maturity factor. And as long as we get people who are mature and can handle it, we give it a shot.
And you know, and that's where it comes in, somebody like yourself, it might be certainly a good idea to visit the law school so that we can talk to you and we can get an idea of, and kind of pick your brain, are you ready for this? You know, is the student going to be professional, mature enough to handle it? I've got a number of students where the answer is yes. I've got a couple more where they decided, after thinking hard, that they wanted to wait. So,
Back right there in the black jacket.
Since the U.S. economic downturn and recovery,
Little louder.
Since the economic downturn and recovery has affected so many careers and employment, how would you say that that's affected your applicant pool and your graduates in finding employment?
You can tell we've turned the corner, eh? That all happened in 2008 when you were still a teenager and not really reading all the media that we got nailed with. Because at one point in the early part of 2009, the New York Times decided that law was the only profession that should not be affected by the economic downturn. And that it was incumbent upon the law schools to really tell the truth about placement and all that kind of stuff, which yielded a program called the Transparency Project by the ABA. It has dramatically affected the legal profession. Probably only we know more about it only because we were under such a spotlight for so long. We are now apparently turning a corner where, because of the fact that in 2013 we graduated the largest graduating class in the history of legal education nationwide. Okay? So even though there were starting to become more jobs available, it was no discernible difference because we had so many people placed. They're telling us, which is the National Association of Law Placement is telling us, that the job market is getting much better. The class that just graduated in 2014 was smaller. By the time you all would be graduating, we will have remedied the disadvantage and the disproportionate. The other factor that's coming into play is that if the economy continues to get better, people in our age bracket will retire, which we're not doing right now. And so that's going to cause another gap. But I caution you because the law firms had to learn how to get lean and mean. I've lived through 3 recessions now. The first 2, they did not learn from this. When they had a recession, they cut themselves lean and mean, and then they went back to being crazy. You guys all watched The Good Wife? Any of you? Last season, they did a whole thing about the financial side on it, and as soon as they started turning the corner and got out of bankruptcy, they wanted to rent 3 floors of the building, and the accountant said, no, that's how you got into this problem. And that's what law firms are doing. I don't see them doing that again. They got really burned this time. And so we really don't know, but it is getting a little bit better, I can tell you that much. We had almost double the firms on campus interviewing than we did in 2010 this year. So
I agree. Thank you. Good night. No, I do agree. This, and I'm saying this because I really truly believe this. Whether you end up going to law school or not is your call. Whether you end up going to any of the schools up here or not is your call. Over the past few years, it's been a difficult time to be graduating from law school. But this is a heck of a time to start. Because 3 years from now, those same people who said, oh, we have too many lawyers. Oh, this is a terrible thing. Those same people are going to be coming to us saying, we don't have enough. We don't have enough serving the underserved. We don't have enough serving certain specific industry areas, certain specialization. Someone asked about specialization. There are going to be people coming to us saying that we don't have enough to serve this specific area. So this is a heck of a time to start, because right about the time you all graduate from law school, the law firms will have figured out that they don't need a 50th floor, 50-floor building named after them. They can deal with what they need to deal with a smaller staff and smaller building and smaller resources. And then the job market, which has already started to go up, you guys are going to be hitting it right about this right time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, it's never going to go back to those big boom years that Dean Bloomquist described. It's going to be lean and mean, and that's the new normal. So you have to figure out how you can fit into that, and you can fit into it. You know, just in general, law school placement stats are ticking up. Not drastically, it's baby steps, we're going up, but it's going up. So, you know, and again, those are good questions to ask. Any law school, go to the ABA website, look at the National Association for Law Placement information, NALP information, really do a lot of your research on that before a large financial and personal endeavor that law school is.
And to echo what Janet just said, that's the major advantage that came out of all this hoopla, is that every law school now has to put on what is called the ABA 509 consumer information that details where people have gone to work and the percentage of people that have gone on. It also made it incumbent for NALP to publish in an Excel spreadsheet. And I mean, that thing is copious. You would never be able to print it. It's so long and so wide. For every single law school, how many students went in, how many of the graduates went into public practice, into a law firm, what size law firm, what their salaries were, if they went into nonprofit, if they went in state, out of state, how many states were represented, et cetera, that you just read along this Excel spreadsheet to see if you will get into that much detail. But again, I caution you, because we don't know what the future is going to hold. Okay, so 3 years from now, you can't hold us to the job market's going to be really good if we have another recession or if something else happens, okay? It's if everything goes evenly, so. Right back there. Yeah? Somebody? There you go.
Would you say that it's difficult to find a career in an area that you did not go to law school? So if you went to law school in the Midwest, is it harder to find a career on the West Coast?
A legal career.
Yes.
Okay. If you went to law school in the Midwest, would it be harder to find a career on the East Coast or the West Coast? It's going to depend on the law school, it's going to depend upon where you're at, and it's going to depend on the kind of job. How much hustle you give. I mean, we have students that come in and go to career services for their first meeting and say, I'm originally from California, I have absolutely no desire to go back there, my goal has always been to practice in Seattle. What do I need to do? And if you hustle your butt and position yourself and do everything you do, you'll probably get it done. So.
I think all of our schools place people nationally, for sure. So, you know, I always tell students it's a matter of convenience, right? So if 40% of our alumni are in Chicago, New York, and DC, well, the way they got there were alumni connections, coming in on as a first year and talking to the career services staff, and hustling. Because it's not 50 minutes up the road in Indy, you know. It's 4 hours to Chicago. But you can make those connections, for sure.
One thing you need to understand about law school and the students you're going to be entering law school with is something that has been consistent among the 3 schools that I've worked at. I've worked at Iowa, University of Minnesota Law School, and William Mitchell College of Law. Minnesota and Mitchell are both up in the Twin Cities. 50% of the people who start law school are frankly clueless as to what they want to do. They say something nice and wonderful, a personal statement that looks great, and go, ooh, this is going to be pretty cool. Frankly, they're clueless. But they're smart enough to figure it out. They are smart enough to figure it out somewhere along the line. 40% have a clue, but are going to change their minds. They may want to do X law on the West Coast, and then they find out about a friend, a colleague who grew up in Iowa, or somebody who is doing something different locally. And they kind of check that out. They check out other things. They get involved in a clinic. They start writing for one of the journal publications at their school. Now, they still may end up doing X law on the West Coast, but the journey to get there was all over the place before they came back to it. There are only about 10% of the entering class at any law school that are frankly clear as to what they want to do and where they want to do it. And those are usually public interest, environmental law, civil rights, and intellectual property. Because for public interest, environmental law, and civil rights, there's a passion there that goes beyond your brain in terms of your commitment to something. Intellectual property, it's because you worked hard to get that biology degree. You're not going to give it up just to go to law school. You're going to try to use it in other areas. Biology, engineering, math, computer science, things like that. So the point is, every school is prepared to help you get you where you want to go, but be flexible, because you may be saying, can I go to this school and do X law on the West Coast? And by the time you graduate, you're doing Y, you're going to Y kind of law on some school on the East Coast, and you never saw it coming. So remain flexible.
Yes, ma'am.
So if your background is in, say, hard sciences, and you want to go to law school and switch into something completely different, like international law, for the letters of recommendation, is it better to stick with professors, like the hard science professors that you had for the rec letters, or would you need, say, someone in the liberal arts to help out for the letters?
Asking questions about letters of recommendation. If you majored in the hard sciences but want to not even touch IP or patent law and want to go into international law, should you get your letters of recommendation from whom? The hard sciences people or the social sciences people?
I would say the professors that know you the best, regardless of what that background is. We are looking for an academic assessment of you. I don't care if it's biology, engineering, international law, English, an academic assessment of you in the classroom, and how you did in all other projects. So that person that knows you best.
And if it's a hard science professor, just tell them that your goal is to be moving into the international law arena, so that he or she can adjust the letter to saying that, as opposed to giving glowing recommendations thinking you're getting a graduate program that's going to go into the hard sciences. Right? So.
What they said.
Other guys? Yes, ma'am, in the peach.
Are there any extracurricular activities in undergrad that you like to see on when you
Are there any extracurricular activities that you'd like to see on a student's resume over others when we're looking at applications? Do you guys all remember when you're getting ready to apply to come here and your high school counselor said to you, you need as many activities as possible so that you can see the breadth of the person and all that kind of stuff? What I'm looking for at this point is you funneling down those activities to maybe one or two that you're taking a leadership role in or expanding upon because of what you're really interested in, as opposed to having 6 gazillion of one of those. But the diversity of what you pick should be, again, based upon your personal interest and your personal passions, because you can defend those better. You know, I was a member of the chess club because I figured it would show you that I was smart. Now, I don't really care about that. I was a member of the chess club because my grandpa taught me how to play chess when I was 5 years old, and it's the one thing that helps my mind go straight again. You see the difference? And that's what we're looking for. So anything that's going to get you people skills, leadership skills, interacting with people, understanding people, exposure to people. You know, everybody's totally convinced if they do an internship or they, you know, give to the poor and volunteer time in, you know, a public agency, that that's going to make them a good person. If you're going to be, excuse the French, a hard-ass corporate lawyer, that's really nice for you to have as your pro bono component of it, but I want to see you maybe doing an internship that's involved in business so you can see how cutthroat it is to affirm that this is the environment you want to be in. And then that makes sense because then it melds all that package together again.
Follow your passion.
Yep, yep, me too.
The striped shirt.
Yes. So for the letters.
No, the striped shirt behind the striped shirt, sorry.
Don't worry, we'll get back to you.
Can you explain the study abroad programs in law school? Like what extra financial burden you'll have or how that works? Because I know usually you would want to go to school somewhere where you plan on practicing. Like one of my goals is to keep developing my Spanish, and so I studied abroad in Spain. Like I wouldn't learn law in Spanish. How does that work?
He's asking about international programs abroad, both the financial commitment and the personal commitment, as well as the professional development. My reaction when you were reading the question, when you were saying the question to Collins is, I love this young man, I'm going to admit him right now. Best question of the day. Real quickly, the financial commitment is daunting. We have a program in China to go for 4 weeks over the summer, which almost every abroad program, with the exception of the one Boston College has with Oxford University, is going to be during the summer. So your financial aid budget is primarily loans, and it's in addition to what you borrowed for the academic year, but it's $10,000 to go to China for 4 weeks. And I just sit there going, because you're losing revenue by being gone for 4 weeks and you're spending money. And while I think it's great, and if you've never, ever, ever, ever stepped outside of this country, or Canada and Mexico don't count, but you've never been outside or had to cross an ocean, then I highly recommend you do an abroad program, albeit maybe a condensed version one, but reasonably priced. You're right on target. If you have no intentions of doing international law and relocating to Spain, you're not most likely going to be learning law in Spanish. You're going to be on a college campus that's teaching you in English, that's going to give you the cultural advantage of being able to interact with the court systems and maybe the businesses in those countries. So it's a very personal decisions about pursuing all of that, but it's one that I'm grappling with as the financial aid person about the debt load that you're taking on and being able to do something that's superfluous to a degree, because most of us are still going to make you take enough coursework that you have to be here for 6 semesters. So doing one summer school session is not going to knock off a semester of school.
Yeah, I would just add to that and say check with the schools as well. I would, excuse me, agree with Dean Bloomquist, definitely. But there are some special programs where you might get a stipend, you might get a little scholarship. So check, but they're few and far between, you know, so I totally agree with you. Financially, it's not going to be your best bet, but if you want the experience, and check on schools that may have a program like that. Yeah.
The letters of recommendation, you say to have a professor do it who knows you best. What happens if their native language is not English, and then they kind of like struggle, maybe like grammatically? Is that held against the applicant?
The question is if the letter of recommendation you're getting from a faculty member is a faculty member where English is not the first language, and so they're going to struggle with the content of the letter, and is that going to be held against the student?
Not for me. I wish the professor well, but I'm not going to hold his or her challenge with the language against you. So, no, I think the spirit of what they say will come through in the letter. So I'll go back to what Janet said before. Go with the people that know you well. I don't have a problem with folks, and it is true. I mean, you do get some letters that may be a bit more difficult, but the spirit of what they're trying to say to you, usually a very supportive spirit, will come through. So I wouldn't worry about it.
And I would say it might be recommended to your writer to just, don't spend the whole letter doing this, but 1 or 2 sentences about, you know, I'm a visiting professor from wherever, and this is what I teach, and and these are how many languages I have in my background. Just like a sentence. I see some letters of recommendation where the faculty member takes 3/4 of the letter to talk about themselves. Mm-hmm. We don't want that. But it might be good in that case to just have a sentence or two, recommend to them a sentence or two about their background.
Right back here.
Excuse me. If you plan on taking a gap year and plan on not applying to law school till after you graduate, is it acceptable to give letters of recommendations while you're still an undergrad and hold on to them for however long you wait until you apply to law school?
The question is, if you're going to be taking a gap year, is there anything wrong with getting letters of recommendation prior to your graduating and hold on to them? The answer is no, there's nothing wrong with that, and the better suggestion is to go ahead and register with CAS, which is a Candidate Assembly Service through LSAC, have the faculty member send the letters of recommendation there, and they hold them for 5 years. And that way the letter is not in your hands.
I would recommend, though, if it's going to be a couple years, get one of the letters, add a recent one for whatever you've been doing. If you've been working, if you've been on a committee, if you've been doing AmeriCorps, something where we can say, oh, this is what he did yesterday or, a month ago. And then we'll couple it with the faculty letters.
And also, keep in touch with the people who wrote the letters, because you may do something phenomenal, then they may want to augment their letter and update it. It just always amazes me that we'll get people who are doing exactly what we suggested that you do, and they just fall out of touch with the person completely. And I'm like, okay, if this was the best deal that you could get in terms of the person that you felt strongest about writing a letter for, seriously? You're not even sending them a Christmas card anymore? Because you take on a different role when you're in active addition. And when you're out of college, too. They like to continue to hear from you. Yes, sir.
What is your view on students taking night classes through law school? And then also, when do most students have to declare that to the law school?
What is the view on taking night classes through law school, and what is your view on that? As a school that started as a part-time evening school over 100 years ago, because that was the mission of the Jesuits at that time, I feel very strongly about people taking night classes. Our night program has gotten significantly smaller because of the economic downturn, and regrettably firms and companies not being willing to let their people out of work or looking at it fondly for that sort of thing. But when you are in a major metropolitan like we are, area that we are in, most of our adjunct faculty member can only teach at night, and you want those experience in the upper class years because they're practitioners during the day. So I don't think you're going to find any schools that are going to be, who are in a major metropolitan area who are going to be anti the night students. I don't know of schools that don't have a night school per se in terms of an entering class, offer classes in the evening. Again, I think that's more geographic. And in our case, you have to put your preference down at the time you're applying. And you can switch divisions after you've come through school.
Years ago, I worked for William Mitchell College of Law, which is a school that has a part-time program, much like Loyola. They started in 1900 as a part-time only program. They didn't have a full-time program until 1978. So the school was founded to go to serve people who had to go to law school part-time, and that usually meant evening. And now I work for a school that has a full-time program only now. We do not have a part-time or evening program. We offer some evening classes, but they're for second and third year students. I have no problem having worked at a school like that. I have no problem with students who need to go to law school in the evening. They have to work just as hard. If anything, they have to juggle more because many of them have academics, they may have professional activities, they may have family issues to deal with. So as someone who used to work for a school like that, I don't have a problem with it. And I think you'll find that many of the people who hire you or come to interview you on campus, they realize the challenge, the personal and professional challenge you had to go through to manage all of those things, and that'll make you look better in the eyes of some people who interview you.
For some of the firms, the fact that you can go from 9 to 9 without getting tired is a benefit.
Yeah. And, you know, Maurer doesn't have a part-time or evening program, but like many full-time law schools, we have students who, in the upper level, will take classes in the evening and work part-time too. So you do still have a full day in your second and third year oftentimes. Just way in the back. Way in the back.
What percentage of admitted students take the Lsat more than once, and what advice would you give to students that are trying to decide whether or not to receive the Lsat?
Okay, what percentages of the student applications take the LSAT more than once, and what advice would you give to students that want to take it more than once?
In our applicant pool at Iowa, we found that about, the number actually is the number of people who've taken it twice has actually gone up over the past few years, and I'll explain that in a second. It's about half the students will take it more than once. In the past, only about a third of the students took it more than once. But people began to take the test more often so they could get some practice at it, and then they go back and take it again. Or they take the test and then cancel the score or do something. So we are now finding about half the applicants take it once and the other half take it more than once, 2 or 3 times. I tell people, or tell students, take it once because you have to. Take it twice because you may not have studied as much or prepared as much for the test as you would have liked, and you honestly, truly think that you can bump your score up. Now you have to be honest and true to yourself. If you studied for that test as hard as you could and everything was okay, you didn't have any outside occurrences or anything happen to get in the way of your studying, if you studied and you took that test once, then that score you received that first time is probably what you're going to get time and time again, or come within a point or two. It's not going to make a big difference. If, on the other hand, you didn't study at all, you just winged it, which I do not recommend. But if for whatever reason you just winged it, or you didn't have time to study, you wanted to, but you didn't have the money, you didn't have the time, you had things going on, then maybe taking it a second time is worthwhile. But my other piece to the recommendation is do not take it more than 3 times. Now you're going to hear a variety of different opinions on this, but mine is do not take it more than 3 times. Because after time 3, you're not going to see a difference in your score no matter what you do. The average increase for people who take the test nationally from time 1 to time 2, the average increase from time 1 to time 2 is about 2 points. From time 2 to time 3, the national average increase is about 1 point. After time 3, it's a flat line. You really don't see a difference after time 3. So take it once because you have to. Take it twice if you really think some extra preparation or some other circumstances change that will help you see if you can increase your score. The 3rd time is your call, but after the 3rd time, stop. Go fishing, go hang out with your friends, do something else.
Yeah, I would say, just to add to that very, very quickly, you want to be prepared to take it only once, okay? So don't take the LSAT like the ACT over and, I think I'll try it. No, that's your practice prep, is trying it over and over and over. Don't pay to try it, okay? You want to really, your goal is to be the best prepared you can and take it once. And then, as Collins said, if you feel you can increase it because you really felt it wasn't your best shot, fine.
Two things. One is judgment. We used to see, and we still see, people who take the test and then write an excuse as to why they did not perform, and the excuse usually was extraneous circumstances. The classic was when the bees came in through an open window in the June test, and everybody was distracted by that. There was another one with the marching band. I couldn't concentrate. Somebody's sitting next to me. If you are sitting in an environment, you have 48 hours to cancel the exam. My most famous one is the student who parked her car, opened up her door on a side street, a cab came around and took off the driver's door. a half an hour before the exam, and the idiot still took the test with her driver door sitting in her passenger seat in the back of the car, and the car wide open, and she was a tad distracted. Hello? You know, I don't want to hear those excuses. I want you to cancel the test. If for some reason you wake up in the morning and you're sick, or your grandmother passed away the night before, etc., contact LSAC to get your test score moved, your test time moved to a different time. It's your guardian angel saying you're not ready. Do not put yourself into that distraction whatsoever. Last Saturday, we were all at the Chicago Forum, and I had minimally 10 people come up and say they were retaking the test because it's going to put them in better scholarship standing. Which is, seriously, we have no idea what the applicant pools are going to look like and what basis we're going to be giving scholarships out on. So if you don't do the best you possibly can the first time, you bumping up again to take the test, thinking if I go up another 2 points, I'm going to get a scholarship that I wouldn't have gotten. There is more than just the LSAT to getting a scholarship. Now, if you truly believe that you can do a lot more, then definitely do that. And unfortunately, the blogs are saying to the students that this is what you should do, is take the test once, kind of get a reading on how well you do, and then go back and kick ass, because then you'll get your scholarship money. I don't want to see you doing that. You have more important things to do with 4 hours of your life than sit in that room again. Yes, sir.
Overall, do most schools take your best LSAT score, or do they average from the other?
For most schools, do they take the average of the LSAT score, or the highest score, or both of the scores, etc.? Can we let them in on the insider secret?
Sure.
We only report the highest score to the
that's
ABA.
right.
Do you guys even see the lower scores?
Oh yeah, we see everything you take for 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, if I see somebody drop by 10 points, or somebody go up by 10 points, I'll probably give you a phone call.
Yep.
But for the most part, if you're within the standard measure of error on the test, which is 3.5 points, we're assuming you're going to go this way. If you go down that way, I want an explanation. Because you already had the exposure, the nerves should be gone, etc. And everybody's that way. Okay. Take her. Yeah.
Staying to the LSAT, do you guys sometimes maybe look at how everyone who took the LSAT, how they all did on that test? In my LSAT prep class, the instructor's been talking about certain LSATs are made a little harder, they're a little more experimental. No? Okay.
No, they're all. Yeah. The question was, do we look at it when people took the LSAT or how people did? We do get a scale across the top that tells us how everybody at Indiana University fared. And a lot of schools do take that in consideration, particularly if they're not familiar with the school, because it'll kind of give them a reading. But beyond that, no.
And it's how people at IU did over the, not just the most recent graduate year, it's over the past, I think it's 3 years.
Yeah.
And we get the same thing for your GPA, and that's for over the past, like, 10 years. I think. Actually, it goes beyond that. But the test is the same. The people, the mix of people who take the test in June will be different from the mix of people who take it in February. And therein, you may have a different median national score or something like that, but the test is the same. So.
Yeah. Back. Yep. Yep.
A lot of students aren't familiar with the Socratic method used in law school. For people who just want to get more familiar with this, is there any way, like, you know, us being IU students, to like maybe sit in a law class at our school?
Great, that's a great transition.
Yep.
I'm so glad you asked that question. Oh, I'm sorry, and I didn't repeat the question.
Yeah.
She just asked, to learn more about the Socratic method, if she could, sit in a class. Absolutely, you can. Any law school will let you do that. And I would highly recommend it if you've never done it. Certainly a first-year class, and then if you want to sit in on another one in an area of your perceived legal interest, you can do that too, typically.
And I would charge you even farther. You have an unbelievably good law school with a very receptive admissions office that really would encourage you to visit. If you don't, you're doing yourself a disservice, because this is the first stepping stone of ascertaining whether or not that's the environment you want to even be in. I mean, we all have perceived ideas what law school is. We all have perceived ideas of what being a lawyer is like. If you can go over to IU's law school and sit in a class with first-year students and then latch yourself to one and say, can I spend a half an hour with you? Can I buy you a cup of coffee? And find out, or ask them, do you know of somebody else who's gone to IU if they're not from IU, or somebody who's from my hometown, etc. That's, you want to do that, capitalize that. And there's one thing, none of us have our law degrees, but there's one thing you will learn from people who are lawyers is they love talking about their profession. And they really enjoy sharing that information, and it's because they want everybody to make a good decision and understand completely what they're going through. So you've got a golden opportunity here that a lot of students don't have at other schools.
Yeah, I encourage you to do that. Talk to as many people familiar with the law as possible.
Yeah.
Mac just got up, so you've got to get your questions answered quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is it ever too early to start visiting? So I'm only a sophomore, so like, can I start like visiting now?
Oh, yeah.
Yep. And then, remember summer road trips? As you start going through the websites of the different law schools and picking up the schools that you want, how I spent my summer vacation to run along looking at law schools, kind of thing.
In fact, I'd say your freshman and sophomore year, primarily you ought to just get good grades, have fun, don't get in trouble. Freshman, sophomore year. For juniors in the crowd, this may be the time to start thinking about who's going to write your letters of recommendation, because you've probably chosen a major. You probably have, or you may have taken multiple courses from people, and maybe you've done well in multiple courses, so you have a sense of the department that you like to hang out in, the professors in that department. You may have become a research assistant or a TA for someone. You're beginning to get to know professors that know you well, and these are people who are candidates to write your letters of recommendation. So for juniors in the crowd, you may want to start thinking about who's going to be writing the letter. Then of course your senior year, if law school is still the thing you want to do, and we hope it is, then you're going to want to ramp up the application process. But it is not too early now to go visit, sit in on a class, talk to Janet or Dean Motley, who's the Dean of Admissions here at Indiana. You've got some wonderful people here.
And so much of it, guys, you have so much easier than everybody did 10 years ago, because we all have really good websites. But coming with that is that you don't close off any school based on geography or anything else like right now. What you want to do is start scrolling through those websites and visit every table. I tell everybody, you get the bag until it hurts, until it's dragging on the ground, because all of it's recyclable paper that you can bring back to the pre-law office and they'll be happy to disseminate to somebody else. But you don't narrow your search at this point. The reason being is that every school offers something a little bit different. And so they may offer something in terms of a program or a class or a clinic that you didn't even think about but sparks your interest, and then you start making your hit list of what you like. You go to the websites, and we all know this from shopping now on the webs. The front page of the website is very discerning whether or not it grabs you. Okay? We all go someplace, and if we don't like what's on their front page, we diss that one and move on to another website. The same thing with law schools. You know, if it, get that guttural reaction on their first page of what they consider to be important about their school, because that's going to be a telling comment. But go a little bit further and say, I'm going to look for 3 things at every law school, and figure out what the 3 really important things are. Find them on each of the law school's page and where it's buried or prominently displayed, or how much explanation they provide. And that'll give you some insight on whether you pursue that a little bit further. But I don't want to see any of you guys walking out today with less than at least half of the school's materials. Okay? Seriously. And take the time and energy. This is a very expensive decision you're making. You want to make it right.
And just to kind of back on that, this is one, if not the best law fairs in the country that Mac Francis and his office put on. And that's why so many law schools are here for you. So make sure
right. Almost as many as was in Chicago.
Exactly. And keep in touch with the pre-law office here too.
And it's a highly respected school. We all like you guys a lot too, which is why so many schools come to this program. So.
Yeah, say that.
No, I do. Yeah.
Aside from early decision, is there an advantage to applying early, like before the deadline?
Aside early decision, is there an advantage applying early, like before the deadline?
Yes. Thank you. Good night. There are a lot of advantages to applying early. Number one, you have everything in the door. And so if anything's missing, you have time to find it. We have time to find it. You have time to recreate it. So everything's in the door, and you don't have to worry about putting it in the last minute. Number two, you get a decision earlier. Whether it's a good decision or bad decision, at least you know earlier whether or not you got in, and then you can set your strategy. If you got in, are you going to go or not? If you didn't get in, you can apply to other schools. Number three, you have more time to make the decision. If you apply in mid to late February or mid to late March, you're going to have, when you get the decision, let's say if you're offered admission, you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 weeks to make a decision as to whether or not you go. But if you apply earlier, let's say November, December, you find out in, let's say, January, February, you'll have about a month and a half. Because we cannot force you to make a decision, unless it's early decision. We cannot force you to make a decision as to where you go until April 1. So you'll have from, say, February 15th until April 1 to come visit campus, go to the admitted student days. We do all kinds of things like that. And the fourth thing, and this is really important, especially considering the economy, financial aid and scholarships. There are a lot of students who we all admit late in the cycle who we love, but we also know that we've run out of scholarship money, or we are more limited in how much scholarship money we have because the budget has gone down. We award scholarship money on a rolling, well, I guess I should speak for myself, but do we do it on a rolling basis? Same thing with the admissions process. As we offer admission to students, we're also offering scholarships. At some point, that scholarship budget is going to be depleted. It's going to be depleted before the number of spots in the class. So if you apply early, you find out early whether or not you got in, you have time to make a decision, and there's plenty of room in the class, so we don't have to make decisions about, okay, she has a great Lsat, GPA, good activities, but gee, we ran out of room. So you have that taken care of, and we have scholarship money if you are nominated for something.
2 other points. Earlier in the process, school admissions committees are more lenient and willing to take chances than they are when they've seen the whole applicant pool and you're low. You'll probably get waitlisted at that point as opposed to them taking a little bit of a risk because of the space consideration. We can only accept X amount of people to get the yield that we want, and you might get picked later up in the cycle as a waitlisted student, but you're not going to know ahead. Our deadline for our specialized scholarships and our fellowships is you have to be admitted by March 1. And it kicks me every year because we'll have somebody who turns in their application on February 28th. I mean, we're not wizards. We can't turn it around overnight and have a decision for them to make that deadline. And the fellowship committees in particular are very stringent about that. And saying we won't consider them unless they've been admitted. So you want to check with each of the schools, but earlier is always better. I usually say, make it your Christmas present or Hanukkah present. Be done with your application process by then. And then make your new resolution that as soon after January 1st, you do your FAFSA because your parents' information is no longer required, so you can do it on your own. So if you use just those 2 holidays as your barometer, and then buy one of those old calendars that you can now get at 65% off from Barnes & Noble for next year's calendar in November, because nobody buys paper calendars, and use that as where you're listing all your deadlines for all of your schools. So when you flip that month a little bit earlier, guys, like 2 days before the end of the month, you should be flipping to the next month to make sure that the first isn't a deadline. That way you can keep track of when you really need to get stuff done for each of the schools. Yes, ma'am.
So do you guys start looking at the application materials like as they come in or after it's completely done?
Do we look at the application materials as they come in or after it's completely done? Short answer, everybody has a different process.
Yeah, do you mean your own particular pieces of the application or the entire
Right, so
pool?
if I send in my application materials by the end of October, but I don't take the LSAT until the December test date, is my application going to be looked at early or after the LSAT?
No. We have to wait, we wait till every component is in.
And we actually don't get it. We don't get a
Right.
CAS report, so we wouldn't get your transcripts or letters of recommendation until they download the test score. So the only thing we would have is the added essay and the resume. Over there?
One more.
I have a 2-part question. Do most schools have a deferral program? And if so, if we are considering taking a gap year, is it better to apply now and ask to be deferred? Or is it better to apply after you take a year to off working?
That is the best question to end this on, only because you're going to go right to the fair and ask each of the schools that question because it depends on the school. We're fairly liberal on our deferment policy. We actually have a contractual agreement with Teach for America that if the student applies and is admitted for TFA, they are automatically granted a 2-year deferral. There are other schools that will say flat out no.
Yeah. And yeah, it depends, it really does depend on the school too. Almost every, if not every school will have some sort of deferral process. But depending on how they answer your question, that's what you want to know.
But be very careful, you don't want to depend on deferral, because some schools will say flat out no. So don't go into a process expecting to be offered admission and then automatically get your deferral request accepted. There are some schools that are expecting you to enroll the year that you apply. So apply for law school when you're at your optimal point to do well. I think Pam mentioned that before, but also when you're ready to enroll. If you know that you need to defer prior to even applying, you might as well just wait and then apply when you're ready to go. But exactly right, check with the schools, because each school is going to be a little different in terms of how they do that.
Okay, I guess that's the end. Thank you all. But